Joining me now, a man of many talents, Michael Lombardi, been in NFL front offices, has worked in the media as a writer and an analyst, worked with coaching staffs as well. Michael, thanks for being with us here on Sportsnaut. I want to get your take on a number of different things, so I'll jump right in. One of the things you recently wrote on The Athletic triggered memories for me when I was working as a sideline reporter covering Ivy League football, because I used to work with a guy named Ross Tucker, who who's a journeyman offensive lineman, was a star in the Ivy League, and he always used to preach to me, I'll never forget this, that everything that's important in football happens between the trenches. And at the time, I took that with a grain of salt because he's an offensive lineman, but I also really trusted his football acumen because he is the most football obsessed person I've ever met. He used to drive to high school football games to watch games that he didn't even have kids in. And then I read what you were writing on The Athletic about how if you want to build a championship team, you have to focus on the offensive line and the defensive line. Do you think that teams are getting away from that a little bit and targeting skill players too much?
Yeah, I think there's certainly that element that goes in the NFL. I think team building is an art that requires experience. And it's easy. We fall into the trap of the path of least resistance. You know, we see Tyreek Hill, we see, Travis Kelce, we see these great skill players, and we lose track of our identity and what it really requires to win. And, look, I've been working on a book in the last few months, and as you go over some of these great quarterbacks that have had success in the National Football League, whether it be Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, or even Dan Marino. Dan Marino's plays for the winningest coach in NFL history. He goes to a Super Bowl his second season in the NFL and never returns. From the time he's 24 years old to the time he's 29, the prime of his life, he doesn't even make the playoffs. So my point is if you want to be great, you got to be great up front. The quarterback needs to be great too. Quarterbacks can win regular season games. It takes a complete team to win championships.
Well, let's talk about Ben Roethlisberger then, because one of the things you noted on The Athletic is that the Steelers' offensive line is one of those teams where that's lacking a little bit. I think about the Bills as well. But you write that there was a face-to-face meeting between Ben Roethlisberger and the Steelers brass about potentially returning for an 18th season. Why do you think that conversation took place face-to-face as opposed to a phone call?
I think they needed to air some differences. I think when you look back and go back to 2011 when Bruce Arians was fired and Todd Haley took over, one of the reasons Bruce was fired, and if you remember, Mike Tomlin said 2 days before Arians was fired that Arians was coming back. That changed because the Steeler family, the Rooney family, they want to have a balanced attack. They know they play in Pittsburgh. They know weather's a factor. They're an outdoor stadium. They want to control the pace of the game. They're not wanting to be an all-run team, but they want to have some balance. And I think that's why they wanted to move on at that time. And now after Haley and they went to Randy Fitchner, and now as they move to Matt Canada, they're going to need to get some kind of balance in their attack. You can't win football games throwing the ball 55 times. It's impossible. You can do it once in a while. And I think the Steelers know they need to get back to their core identity. And that starts with the quarterback. It starts with Ben being willing to play under center a little bit more. He threw 607 passes last year, 537 out of shotgun. That's a dramatic change in terms of where this league's going. I'm not sure it's the right change either.
So if that's where things are progressing, and as it relates to Pittsburgh specifically, are there any guarantees for Ben Roethlisberger beyond potentially a year? I mean, you say you need a quarterback, and you do. I imagine, I've never been an analyst of talent. I know you have. I imagine that it's tough when you have a veteran heading into his 18th season to continue to assess where they are in an unbiased fashion. But are there any guarantees with Ben Roethlisberger beyond another year in Pittsburgh?
I'm not sure that the year lasts. One thing I learned in my 35-year NFL career is older players might look good in August, but they probably won't look good in December and January when you need them. And Ben looked good in August, and he looked good in September, and they went on a 10-game winning streak, the best in franchise history. But when they needed him most, when they needed him in December and January, he did not play well. I mean, he averaged under 6 yards per attempt. They had no run game to lean on. Their defense was still playing well, but they had no ability to make explosive plays down the field. So I'm always concerned about an older player who doesn't finish the season with real really demonstrating that he hasn't lost any of his skills. Aaron Rodgers, an older player, but I thought he finished the season wonderfully. Phillip Rivers finished the season. You were worried about him. He's since retired. And I think that's where I am with Ben. Can he come back and play well? I don't doubt that. Can he play well in January of next year? That's where I'm a little hesitant.
We'll take Tom Brady out of the equation because he seems like the outlier, the anomaly in terms of finding a way to age backwards. But when you look at veteran quarterbacks overall, in what ways do they really have an edge and an advantage? And in what ways, I mean, physically obviously comes to mind, is there a real disadvantage? I imagine from listening to what you're saying that it's just about that durability down the stretch. But, where do you really get the value with a veteran?
Well, the veteran, one of the things the defensive coordinator's job is to create uncertainty. And the more experience you gain at quarterback, the harder it is to create uncertainty. It was hard to fool Peyton Manning. It's hard to fool Aaron Rodgers. And so really, when you take uncertainty out of the equation and they can execute, they're pretty hard to stop. But as they get older, what really becomes most effective on them is their inability to want to take hits. So their eye level starts to come down. They start to worry about what the left tackle did. They start to look at the right tackle. They start to be concerned about areas that they perhaps shouldn't be concerned about in earlier times when they look down the field. And one of the numbers that you have to use to equate to that, whether that problem is occurring, is yards per attempt. Aaron Rodgers, up till this season, in the last 5 years, his yards per attempt were dramatically decreasing. This year, it scaled back up. Phillip Rivers was decreasing. Ben Roethlisberger significantly decreasing. And what that means is they don't want to hold the ball as long as they need to hold the ball to get it out of there, because those hits, and let's face it, they've taken a lot of them in their NFL career, they're harder to take.
While we're talking quarterbacks, I mean, more than half the league, it seems, there are questions at quarterback. There are obviously the salary cap issues, but Russell Wilson making headlines, his future in Seattle may be somewhat uncertain. Reports coming from multiple outlets that there's a rift between him and Pete Carroll. Do you expect that Russell Wilson will be back with Seattle?
I do. I do think, but I think we're entering a time where talent, really top-level talent, and we've seen this in other industries. There used to be time in Hollywood where if you were an actor, you worked for a studio and you did what the studio told you to do. And then talent rose so much that talent started to tell the studios what to do. I think we're getting to that a little bit in the NFL, where the talent is becoming greater and the talent wants to have a voice in some of the things and some of the decisions. I'm not saying they should have a voice. I'm saying they want a voice. Not necessarily all the time, but they want to have some kind of way to deliver what they feel is in the best interest of their talent. So I do think it'll get rectified. I think this is more about money than anything. When you look at the deals that have come in, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes, I mean, let's face it, both Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson are two talented players, and they're going to make about $12 million a year less than Patrick Mahomes. Is that fair? I don't think so. And I think there's something needs to be done about it.
It's interesting. My mind went straight to Deshaun Watson when you said that. And I wonder if the NFL is going to follow the NBA blueprint in terms of stars having a tremendous amount of power and being able to pick and choose and disrupt the league and the market in that way. I spoke with Mike Giardi about that a couple weeks ago. Your exact point is that these stars seem to have a little bit more decision-making power, a little bit more leverage than they've had in the past. Which brings me to J.J. Watt, the news that he's now going to be with Arizona. And I saw that you tweeted, man, that's a whole lot of money. Is that, in fact, how you feel? I mean, a 2-year deal with $23 million guaranteed and the total over 30?
It is. Look, when you pay somebody above that 10 million threshold, you want to walk off the field on Sunday and feel it. You want to know that he tilted the balance in favor of the wins. And frankly, J.J. Watt's a really good player, but he hasn't been able to do that over the last couple seasons, partly because he's played too many plays, partly because he's out there too much. To me, he needed to be in a lesser role. Less of J.J. Watt was going to mean more, not more. And when you pay somebody $15 million a year that doesn't play the quarterback position, they better tilt the field in your favor, because you don't have a lot of $15 million a year players. And if he can't do that, now, he can do it in the run game. They won't run the ball strong side on him if he plays over the tight end. They won't run the ball strong side if he's on the tackle. But will he rush the passer effectively enough to really create a disruption? all through the season, to me, that's a lot of risk for the money that they put in. And it's typical of the Cardinals. They have this desire to sign Hall of Fame players towards the end of their career. It hasn't worked out for them, but they keep going doing it.
There are familiar faces for him in Arizona, but as you know, I'm guessing it's a very small league, that there are familiar faces everywhere with only 32 teams. But you think about DeAndre Hopkins, and then I believe his defensive coordinator for his first 3 seasons in Houston as well, it was the defensive backs coach. So, I mean, JJ's coming into a situation where he's familiar, and I was surprised to read that at least the reports that said that one of the reasons why he wanted to go to Arizona was because of their young quarterback too, Kyler Murray. I mean, do you think that that played into it? Was it the fact that they were going to throw a lot of money at him? Upwards of 12 teams wanted JJ Watt, I think, at one point.
Well, I've learned in my career that, when somebody says there's 12 teams involved, that's probably true. There's just not 12 teams making offers. How much cash was there's a difference between a team being interested and a team being willing to spend. Those, to me, have always been few and far between. And whenever there's been a time where someone said there's 3 or 4 teams competing, I've learned afterwards that it's usually just 1, maybe 2 teams compete for one player. Do I think J.J. Watt had offers? Sure. I think there was a more sensible offer somewhere below the 10 million threshold with play time that could earn him up there because they wanted to utilize his skill. But look, he chose Arizona. I think it's an interesting call for him because it does have a dome element. He'll play next to Chandler Jones or the other side of Chandler Jones, something that will certainly help him. But this team has a lot of holes. I mean, their quarterback, really, when we watched him play last year, he ran the ball more effectively later in the season than he was throwing it. They struggled to throw the football late in the year, and he struggled to deliver in a passing game late in the season. And their offensive line is in flux. They're going to need some changes within that line. Will Larry Fitzgerald be back? I don't know. I think there's some question marks about that. So I think this is a team in transition. Their cornerback situation, Patrick Peterson's a free agent. Drake Kirkpatrick played on the other side. They've got a lot of interesting decisions to make. And when you put $15 million in one player, you've kind of limited your decision pool.
Yeah, not a lot of teams seem like they have that cap flexibility. The Jets seemingly do. The Patriots seem like they've got a little bit of room. And since we're talking about quarterbacks, I know how familiar you are with the organization. I mean, I just wonder overall, if you put your front office hat on for a moment and indulge me here, what is on the New England Patriots wish list as they look to kind of retool here as well?
It's funny. Today I read on Twitter that the Patriots are interested in all the quarterbacks in the draft. Like, how is that even a news story? Why wouldn't they be interested in every quarterback? Like, sometimes we create stories that are just so obvious. And, I think they're going to do their due diligence on everybody. I think they have to. And I think they're going to compare everybody to what they think Cam Newton could do if they brought him back. If they brought Cam back and he had a full training camp and he had a full offseason program to really learn the offense, can his arm strength, can his arm become even better? Can he fit more into the passing game? Because they ran the ball effectively last year. They won 7 games. And they had opportunities to win a couple. They didn't play well down the stretch. So I think they're going to compare that. Do I think they'll draft one? Sure. I don't know. Will they fit one in the first round? I think unless it's a really good player that they get a good value on. Remember, I think you have to evaluate this job in the National Football League as a general manager, not as fan, as a general manager. You're really an appraiser. You're basically running a hedge fund. And if you pay too much for a stock or you pay too much for a business, it's going to come back to bite you. And you have to understand when supply is high, when demand's low, and take advantage of the variables within the market. And I think that's what Belichick has done a great job of doing.
Man, that's great insight. Everybody had an abbreviated offseason. Just to follow up on what you were saying with Cam, do you think that the majority of his issues this past season was because he didn't get a chance to learn the playbook? I mean, we hear all of these rumors, myths, lore, what have you, about how complicated the Patriots playbook is. If he did have a little bit more time, do you expect a different result?
I think partly they needed a tight end. They had no tight end. Ryan Izzo was their only tight end on the team that really could do anything. I mean, the skill around Cam wasn't the most favorable for him. Jacoby Myers played well. N'Keal Harry still hasn't emerged as a first-round draft pick at the receiver position. So there's a lot of DeMarcus Byrd who played with them at Carolina and then at Arizona. I mean, there was a lot of things that you could make the argument that he didn't really have a supporting cast, maybe with a better supporting cast. I mean, they have a ton of cap room, so they're going to make their team better. Would that help them? One thing about Cam, he brought him leadership. The team rallied around him. The team bought into him. The team liked him. And usually, if you're not very good, the team won't follow you. And I think that the team saw that he was very good and he gave it all he had. I think they would be a lot worse position, trying to sign someone they didn't know as opposed to bringing Cam back, depending on the talent level of that person.
He is very charismatic, and he did seem to get the locker room behind him in stunningly fast fashion, especially in such an abbreviated offseason. But I think to your point, if you want to look at it black and white, Tom Brady maybe heading to Tampa is because of exactly what you just said, that they didn't have the weapons around him and the support that maybe he needed this season. Michael Lombardi, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate your analysis.
Thank you, Carolyn.